In the realm of ancient mythology, where the tales of gods and mortals intertwine, there exists a lesser-known narrative that speaks of a time when Zeus, the king of the gods, faced an unprecedented threat to his dominion. This tale, often overshadowed by the grand exploits of the Olympian pantheon, reveals the fragility of power and the depths of ambition, betrayal, and cunning. It begins in the shadowy corners of Olympus, where whispers of dissent began to stir among the deities. The seeds of rebellion were sown not by a mighty titan or a ferocious monster, but by a seemingly unassuming figure, Prometheus. Known for his cleverness and foresight, Prometheus had always been a loyal ally to Zeus, even defying the Titans to aid the gods in their ascent to power. However, with the passage of time, Prometheus grew disillusioned with Zeus's rule. He had witnessed the king's increasing arrogance and the way he treated both gods and mortals with a heavy hand. The once mighty Titan's compassion for humanity began to overshadow his allegiance to Zeus, and a plan began to take root in his mind. Prometheus's discontent was not an isolated sentiment. Among the lesser gods, whispers of rebellion echoed through the halls of Olympus. They felt overshadowed by Zeus's might, his thunderbolts casting a long shadow over their own powers. Among them was Hecate, the goddess of magic and witchcraft, who had long been an observer of the injustices meted out by Zeus. She, too, had grown weary of the king's arrogance and the way he manipulated the fates of gods and mortals alike. Hecate, with her knowledge of the arcane, became a crucial ally in Prometheus's scheme. Together, they plotted in secret, weaving a web of intrigue that would ensnare Zeus. Their plan was not just to dethrone him, but to imprison him, to strip him of his power and force him to confront the consequences of his actions. The first step was to gather allies among the lesser gods, and even some of the Titans who had once been loyal to Zeus. They reached out to those who had been wronged, those who had suffered under his rule, and slowly, a coalition began to form, united by a common desire for change. As the conspirators gathered strength, Prometheus and Hecate sought to harness the power of the primordial forces of the universe. They knew that to bind Zeus, they would need a force that could rival his own. They turned to the ancient spirits of chaos, the very essence of the universe that existed before even the Titans. These spirits, long forgotten by the gods, were restless and eager to reclaim their influence. In exchange for their aid, Prometheus promised them a place of power in the new order that would rise from the ashes of Zeus's reign. The day of reckoning approached, shrouded in secrecy. The conspirators convened in a hidden chamber deep within the earth, where the echoes of their ambitions reverberated off the walls. They devised a ritual that would bind Zeus, using the very elements that he wielded so effortlessly. The plan was audacious, a gamble that could either lead to their triumph or their destruction. As they prepared for the ritual, the atmosphere was thick with tension and anticipation, each god acutely aware of the risks involved. On the appointed day, the skies darkened, and a storm brewed over Olympus, a portent of the chaos that was to unfold. Prometheus, Hecate, and their allies gathered at the peak of Mount Olympus, where Zeus ruled with an iron fist. As they began the incantations, the air crackled with energy, and the very ground trembled beneath their feet. The spirits of chaos surged forth, swirling around the gods, their whispers filling the air with promises of power and retribution. Zeus, sensing the disturbance, descended from his throne, his brow furrowed with anger. He had always been vigilant against threats, and the sudden change in the atmosphere did not escape his notice. As he approached the gathering, the conspirators completed their incantation, channeling the chaotic energies toward Zeus. In that moment, the skies split open, and a blinding light enveloped the king of the gods. Caught off guard, Zeus struggled against the bonds that began to encircle him, formed from the very essence of the storm he commanded. He roared in defiance, calling upon his thunderbolts, but the chaotic spirits twisted his powers, rendering him vulnerable. The once mighty king was brought to his knees as the bonds tightened, a symbol of the rebellion that had risen against him. Yet, as the conspirators reveled in their success, a flicker of doubt began to creep into Prometheus's heart. He had never intended for things to escalate to this point. The imprisonment of Zeus, the very god who had granted him life and purpose, weighed heavily on his conscience. Hecate, sensing his hesitation, urged him to remain steadfast, reminding him of the injustices that had led them to this moment. But Prometheus's heart was torn. He had sought justice, not vengeance. As the storm raged on, Zeus's voice boomed through the chaos. "You dare to defy me? You will regret this folly." His words, laced with the power of thunder, reverberated in the hearts of the conspirators. Doubt began to spread among them, and the once unified front began to fracture. Some gods hesitated, questioning the morality of their actions, while others felt the weight of Zeus's wrath and began to falter. In the midst of this turmoil, a figure emerged from the shadows, one who had remained hidden until this pivotal moment. Hera, queen of the gods and Zeus's wife, had been watching the events unfold with a mix of anger and despair. She had often been the voice of reason, a stabilizing force in the tumultuous world of Olympus. Now, witnessing the betrayal of her fellow gods, she felt a surge of determination. Hera stepped forward, her voice steady and commanding. "Enough! This is not the way to bring about change. You would imprison our king and unleash chaos upon the world? Think of the mortals who rely on him for order. Think of the balance that will be shattered." Her words resonated with many, igniting a spark of doubt in the hearts of the conspirators. Prometheus, torn between his desire for justice and his loyalty to Zeus, felt a wave of relief wash over him as Hera spoke. Perhaps there was a way to confront Zeus without resorting to imprisonment. Perhaps they could find a way to hold him accountable for his actions without sacrificing their own integrity. He stepped forward, his voice rising above the storm. "Hera is right. We must not become the very tyrants we seek to overthrow." Hecate, sensing the tide turning against her, attempted to rally the conspirators once more. "We cannot back down now. We have come too far." But the resolve of the group was wavering. The power of Zeus, even in his imprisonment, was palpable, and the fear of his wrath loomed large. As the storm began to dissipate, Zeus, still bound but no longer defenseless, looked upon the assembled gods with a mixture of anger and sadness. "You would turn against me, your king, after all I have done for you?" His voice, though powerful, now held a note of vulnerability. "I have ruled with strength, but I have also protected you. Without me, chaos will reign." In that moment, the gods were faced with a choice. They could either continue down the path of rebellion, risking everything for the sake of ambition, or they could seek a different resolution. The air crackled with tension as they weighed their options, each god reflecting on their own experiences under Zeus's rule. Many had suffered, but many had also thrived under his leadership. Prometheus, inspired by Hera's words, stepped forward once more. "Let us not be blinded by anger. Instead, let us confront Zeus and demand accountability. Let us remind him of the responsibilities that come with power." His voice rang with conviction, and one by one, the conspirators began to nod in agreement. Hecate, realizing the tide had turned against her, felt the weight of her ambitions crash down upon her. She had sought to bring about change, but had nearly plunged them all into chaos. With a heavy heart, she stepped back, allowing the others to take the lead. As the storm cleared and the sun broke through the clouds, the gods gathered around Zeus, now a prisoner but still a formidable presence. Prometheus, with a newfound sense of purpose, addressed the king. "Zeus, we do not seek to destroy you, but we demand that you recognize the burden of your power. We ask for a council, a place where all gods can voice their concerns and participate in the decisions that shape our world." Zeus, still bound but listening intently, felt the weight of their words. The rebellion had forced him to confront the consequences of his actions, and for the first time, he saw the cracks in his own authority. He had ruled with an iron fist, but perhaps it was time to share the burden of leadership. With a heavy sigh, Zeus nodded, his voice softer now. "Very well. I will listen. But know this, the strength of a king lies not only in his power, but in his ability to unite his people." The bonds that had held him began to loosen, and the gods stood in silence, contemplating the implications of this new understanding. As the sun shone brightly over Olympus, a new chapter began to unfold. The gods, once divided by ambition and fear, now stood united in their desire for a more equitable rule. Zeus, humbled by the experience, agreed to form a council where all voices would be heard. Prometheus and Hera emerged as key figures in this new governance, guiding the other gods toward a more just and harmonious existence. In the end, the tale of Zeus's imprisonment became a story not of betrayal, but of redemption. It served as a reminder that even the mightiest of beings could be brought low, not by force, but by the power of unity and understanding. The gods learned that true strength lay not in dominance, but in collaboration, and from that day forward, Olympus stood as a testament to the resilience of both gods and mortals alike. Thus, the lesser-known tale of Zeus's near overthrow transformed into a narrative of growth, change, and the enduring power of compassion, echoing through the ages as a lesson for all who dared to wield power.